This episode is brought to you by Peloton. This year, Peloton is gifting you their best offer of the season. Get up to $300 off accessories like cycling shoes, a heart rate monitor, and more when you purchase a Peloton bike, Bike Plus, or Tread. Whether you have 10 minutes to spare for a strength class or 30 for a cycling class, there's a workout that works for you. To learn more, visit onepeloton.com. All access membership separate. Offer starts November 14th and ends November 28th. Cannot be combined with other offers. See additional terms at onepeloton.com.
On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Ronda. And Ronda lived in a dysfunctional family with an abusive Mr. Right. It's a story of invalidation, intimidation, identity, self-worth, trust, and unconditional love. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have someone named Ronda, and we will get to Ronda in a second, but I have a couple of things before we begin this episode. First, if you want to be a guest on our show, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Top of the page, there's a button that says guest form. When you click on that button, it takes you to our guest form page, and then please read all the instructions and send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com, or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send in your stories. We need stories. This podcast can't happen without your stories, so please send them in. And the other thing that I want to discuss is an initiative that I've been wanting to do for a while, which is on our website. I want to be able to build a place for survivors if they're trying to get out or if they've just gotten out, a place for them to leave a link to their Etsy store, to their eBay store. If you're a freelancer, that your services are on there, any type of business that you have and you're a survivor and you're trying to save money to get out, or you're just trying to live. Well, we want to create a page where we can tell people to come. If you're going to be shopping for someone, if you're going to be using a service and it's maybe copywriting, something along those lines, that if you're going to do that, come and use the services of people that really need your help. They need to get out. They need to squirrel money away. They need to survive on their own once they're out. They need to create nest eggs. They just need to put food on the table for themselves, a lot of the times for their children as well. So we want to create this on our website. So if you out there have a store, or if you have a freelance type business, and you're just trying to make ends meet, and you're just trying to get out of the situation you're in as well, please send us a link to your stores. Just send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com. Send us everything you have. We're going to start building this out within the next few months so people can come. They will have sections on there if it's a specific service, or if it's like you're making clothes or things like that, jewelry, and we'll be able to link to your store. So people will just use it as a portal to go through. So please do send what you have in, and eventually we'll have a really solid place for people to come and use your services, and hopefully we can help you squirrel money away, or just really live. So that is the second thing I wanted to say today before we began our show. So the episode that you are about to hear today was actually out once for about 12 hours. So if you heard this episode many, many years ago, it was only up for 12 hours. And there was a reason why it was taken down. And it wasn't because the person who recorded it wanted it taken down. I thought it was best at the time to do so. And this episode changed a lot of the way we do things around here. And that goes from names to a lot of the times we change the places. And also, I always like to tell people to not share it. I know a lot of people want to share their episode, but the more you share, the more it can get into the path of the people you don't want to hear it. And with this episode, that happened. And the person still wanted the episode up, but for the sake of the show at the time, I thought it was best to just leave it be for a while. And I know this person is doing much better now. So today you're going to hear an episode that really changed the way we did things around here. It was pivotal in that way. And I just want to thank Ronda for being our guest at the time and being patient. And you're going to hear a lot of, sometimes on this episode, spaces where names could be. So once again, a big thank you to Ronda and for all your patience. And last two things before we begin, there were some issues with the sound on this episode. We got it to the best possible place we could get to because we tried to change or alter the voice a little when we went through this process once again. And the other thing is that there's a trigger warning on this episode. There is mention of physical violence, and there's a description of physical violence that goes on in this episode. So if that is too much for you, please turn the episode off now. So with all that being said, Ronda, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was born into a big family, a quite loving family. When I was a child, my father wasn't really in the picture, but that didn't really affect my childhood much because I was raised by my grandmother and my mother. And really, for me, I had a really, really loving, happy childhood. It was the only thing that I knew, and I wanted nothing more. My grandmother was one of the most amazing women that I've ever had a privilege of meeting, and everything I am is because of her. My family growing up was quite poor, and they had their difficulties with addiction. Again, that didn't really take away from my childhood and what I had and the kind of love that I had. In 2003, my mother gave birth to my brother, and she was quite sick at this point already. And shortly after giving birth to him, she got really ill. So I ended up taking care of my brother for a few months until we took him to the hospital, and Skate took him and put him in an orphanage. And about a year later, my mother had passed away from combination of tuberculosis and drug addiction. And that day, I'll never forget that day for the rest of my life. I mean, I think in that moment, I really kind of lost a sense of childhood and a sense of my identity. That was something that I just felt like I needed to grow up in that moment. And everything happened so fast. It was very chaotic and very emotional. Within months of my mother's passing, I was put in an orphanage as well, which I had run away from a few times to be with my grandmother. But I remember one day I was sitting in class, and the principal of the orphanage came in, and she said, "I would like to speak with you." And they put me aside, and she told me that my brother was there waiting for me if I wanted to say hello. And I said, of course, because I haven't seen him in about a year at this point. I was very excited to see him, and it was very emotional, and I got to hold him. And they said that my brother was going to go to America. And I was so excited for him. And again, it was very confusing for me. I didn't know what was happening. But they asked me if I wanted to go and see my brother in America as well. And of course, I said yes, because, I hadn't seen him for a year, and I was so excited. And so within a few months of me meeting my brother, I was applying for a passport, and pretty soon I was on my way to United States, and I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know that I was being adopted at the time. It was never expressed to me. It was something that they made it seem as if I was visiting my brother, and that was it. Coming to United States was quite challenging for me in a lot of ways because, one, I didn't speak a language, and so it was very hard for me to communicate with family, and it was also very hard for the family to communicate with me. it was something that brought out frustration in both of us because we didn't know how to communicate. And I remember having this little book after being with them for about a few months. I started missing home, and I had this book that was Russian to English translation. And I kept highlighting the word doma, and I kept showing it to the mother because I wanted to go back and be with my grandmother. I kept saying, I want to go home, go home, go home. And my brother's mom, she didn't really know how to communicate to me that. And so we just ended up getting in a lot of fights. And just because it was out of frustration, it was something that we didn't know how to deal with. Within about 4 or 5 months of being them, I kind of started learning a few words and started communicating with them. And I could have, the bare minimum sentence with them. And everything was, we started communicating, and they started asking me questions like what kind of family I wanted to live with, where I wanted to live, if I wanted a big family. And I just didn't know what they were like asking me. It was, again, very confusing. It was.
So here you are, you're 10 years old right around this time. And unbeknownst to you, you have been taken from an orphanage, shipped or brought over to the United States. And you have really no clue what is going on. You just have no idea. You're now with a family. It's really difficult for you to communicate with them. They don't speak the same language as you. They're not equipped for this as well. And back home, no one really knows what's going on. So, like, how are you doing at this point? Because this really has to be the most frightening thing in the world. You're only 10 years old, and you're now in a completely different country, values, everything, and you're with this family, and you're so far away, like you don't know how to leave. You are just alone. So how is it dealing with everything while you are there?
I mean, I remember just like being so frustrated. I didn't know how to communicate with anyone in school. I didn't know how to communicate with my family. I was crying constantly. I was sad because I was missing my home. And felt like I was ripped out from my home that I had a happy childhood. And for some people, it may not seem like that, but for me, that's all I knew. And suddenly I had no identity, no way of dealing with any of this. And I just was kind of there. I was just existing, and I just was putting my frustration. I think I was projecting my frustration on her and her husband. And for them, I'm sure it was difficult too, because they didn't really expect to adopt both of us. They were going to adopt my brother. And then the judge had said that they needed to take us both in if they wanted my brother. And so for them, it was something new and something that they didn't really expect either. So I remember it sat me down, and they were telling me that I was going to go live with a different family. And I was absolutely devastated. I was just so angry with them and so frustrated that suddenly I wanted one thing. I wanted to go back to, and they were, pushing me to go live with a different family here in USA. And I didn't want that.
So eventually you get a letter from a new family, and this new family is in California, and they are excited to meet you, and they send you pictures and just really nice things about you being part of their family. And you end up going to California. But do you have hope that you'll still be going back home to your home country one day or soon?
I think that initially, maybe if I keep emphasizing this, that I will eventually get my way, and that I will end up going to see my grandmother. But I think my perspective kind of started shifting, because they both were very loving and very inviting. She's just a very funny, very kind of outgoing person. And they welcomed me into their home like I was their own. And I met my siblings, and the night after they picked me up from the airport, I met my extended family members. And so it all happened so fast. And I started to feel like maybe that this is where I was going to stay, reassuring me. They were saying, no, this is your family, because I kind of had this moment where I was trying to push away, and I was telling them, like, I want to go back. And I was kind of testing things. And especially she just kept reassuring. She said, no, this is your home. Like, this is your family. She said, you had a family and they'll always be your family, but we're your new family and we'll kind of love you no matter what. And so I think it was in that moment very comforting to hear that, because I think I was maybe afraid that I was going to be maybe put into a different family, and it was going to be like this constant cycle. So that was kind of my main concern that I was worried about. But the first 3-4 months that I was with, I started feeling home quite fast. I was calling him dad. I was calling her mom. And things were going well. I started school, and I was put into ESL, English Second Language. And so I was doing that. And then things started to I had these warning signs. I don't think I realized that they were there, but it didn't feel right in the moment. He would have these random outbursts where he would like yell, or he would scream at something, at me for something that was, I couldn't even remember. They were such little things, and I just wasn't feeling like that was right. And I remember, she would step in and she would say something, and that would be the end of it. But of course, with the language barrier, I still kind of had a hard time understanding fully why he was upset with me, or why he was yelling at me. The thing that they kept emphasizing was respect, and that they were trying to teach me, I guess, respect and what that looked like. But yeah, and his demeanor started changing, his whole kind of personality. Suddenly, this welcoming person that welcomed me into his home, that made me feel very safe, I started suddenly second guess things, and I kind of started pulling myself back a little bit, because he made me feel uncomfortable a lot of times with just his demeanor and the way that he would communicate with me, with yelling and screaming. And sometimes, he would out of frustration, he would punch the walls and things like that around me. And so it was quite hard. I had a hard time kind of dealing with that.
So one thing I really want to point out here is that even though you came from this very, very poor upbringing, you had a family of addicts, you were still in this loving family. You knew what love is, you knew what love was, what love actually felt like, and what it was like to be in this loving family, especially because of your grandmother. So the first 10 years of your life, you just really had this feeling of what love was. So you knew when it wasn't there that it was gone. So now you're in this situation where what is going on isn't right, but you're feeling that there is no love there, but you're still 10 years old, and because you're 10, your voice isn't really being heard by anybody.
Absolutely. I think there was this idea of, reflecting back on it, of this unconditional love, where I had it when I was a child, and, I never questioned that. And suddenly I was put into this environment where the family was telling me that they loved me and that they really welcomed me, but I wasn't feeling, I started not to feel that. And that became kind of like a warning sign for me that I later looked back on, because at the time I didn't really understand. It was all so chaotic and so much was happening that I was, still in the process of mourning my mother's death. And I was kind of still going through that. So that was, something that was kind of, I didn't even pay attention to really. Like I said, I was taken out of my home, and then suddenly my identity was gone. Suddenly I was placed into this home, and I think in part expected me to be very accommodating to him. And I don't know if they realized, because they adopted 3 other children, and those 3 kids they adopted from when they were babies. And suddenly I come in 10 years old and, I retaliate on some things, and he doesn't like that. And I think that's where kind of the abuse begins. And I started seeing patterns with him throughout middle school, with the nitpicking. He would do certain things. He would make comments about the way that I said some words, or that I was mispronouncing words, or that I was using the wrong words. He would make comments about my weight. He would tell me that I'm too skinny, I need to put on muscle. And then he would tell me that I need to lose weight. So just little things like that. He was also in a lot of ways very controlling. Like he would, when he would have these mood swings, if you will, or outbursts, I would retaliate, and I would push back, and suddenly it came down to this respect. And he's, him saying, "This is my house, you need to respect me." And basically my voice was irrelevant. That was challenging as well. And in all of that, my mom, she also just kind of, she saw what was happening, and she would just say, "Well, you just need to respect him." And, sometimes she would make comments that I was too sensitive about certain things, that he's just joking, and just trying to, I don't know, undercut the situation of what was really happening, I think. So I don't know. And in this chaos that was happening, I started developing depression. Suddenly, I started to feel a bit uncomfortable in sharing certain things.
So what is going on here right now is that your mom really isn't protecting you, and she's kind of protecting your dad, and she's invalidating your emotions and then making you feel guilty about having emotions at a certain point. So are you losing trust in your mom? Are you doing it consciously or unconsciously at this point? Because essentially she has abandoned you. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. And the reason that this is also so confusing is when all this is happening, they're still encouraging me to, I was writing letters to my grandmother and all these things. And finally, I was having that relationship also, and they were so supportive of that. So it was just, again, very mixed signals. And so I think it was easier for me to see the patterns of his emotional abuse. But I think it was a bit harder for me to see mom's way of using guilt and invalidation to kind of, I don't know, in ways push me away. And I don't know if I didn't want to believe that, or if it was something that I just didn't understand in that moment.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. So there's this movie that I really like called Boyhood by Richard Linklater. And one of the main points of the movie is that no matter what your age is, that no one really has life figured out. And that really hit home with me, as every time that I think that I have my life figured out, the old universe likes to throw me a curveball. And unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual. And I get stuck a lot, and that's where my BetterHelp therapist helps me navigate all my problems, big and small, from dealing with my scary emotions to helping me with my coping skills. My BetterHelp therapist really helps me get back into my body so I can regulate myself to see things much clearer than I did before. And as the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online, plus it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with the therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/nap. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/nap. So you just brought up your grandmother again, and right around this time, you're about 11 years old. Does your grandmother know what's actually going on?
For me, she was very confused. I was writing to her and I was telling her that I was in USA, that I was living with this family, and she was very confused. And in one of the letters, she actually told me that she went to the orphanage. She saved up enough money to visit me in the orphanage, which was quite ways away from my home. When I learned this, I was devastated because in that moment, I realized that my grandmother had no idea that I was adopted either. And that was very devastating for me because I felt in a lot of ways this guilt and the shame kind of started to crawl up because I started feeling like I had in ways betrayed my grandmother. For me, suddenly I had all these opportunities, this life that from outside looks, just wonderful, like a happy family, many opportunities, food on the table, things like that, and things that my grandmother didn't have and lost. And I was becoming really, I started feeling really, really guilty. And we communicated until she sadly passed away. I continued writing her and the letters stopped coming in. And I finally sent out one final letter and I said, please, just let me know. I kind of had this intuition that something had happened. And I just wrote in the letter and I said, please, if someone reads this letter, just please write to me to let me know what had happened. And I received a letter telling me that my grandmother had passed away. I lost a big part of my identity and the very little that I had just was gone and I was shattered. I felt like so isolated, and they were there and they supported me in this moment. But again, it was something that they couldn't understand.
So at this point, you are officially alone as far as the people that you know unconditionally love you. And you are in the United States. You are by yourself. You're still very young. It's been really just chaos for you within this time. No one understanding really the depths of what you're dealing with, the struggle of always wanting to go back home. And now the connection to that home is gone. It is just gone. So you told me that you eventually at this point started to battle depression. So what happens with you here personally when it comes to your own mental health?
Yeah. I think my depression at this point intensifies, and I in a lot of ways start developing anxiety. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time. I just had symptoms of it. I just would have random panic attacks, and I couldn't describe what they were. I shared some things with my mom because at this point, I still felt like she was there for me in a lot of ways. But still, like, I was coping with it on my own, I think, because I tended to internalize a lot more than be more expressive of things. And so I just, in a lot of ways, I isolated myself. And middle school was pretty hard. I started going to school, and it was like this pattern for me. I would go to school, I would do my my classes, I would do things, and then I would come home. He'd become more overbearing with a lot of things. He would never respect my privacy or my space. And whenever I would ask for it, he would say things like, you need to respect me. Respect was a big thing. And then that this is my house. I think that started coming in a lot more. And if I want to go into your room, like, I'm going to go into your room. You can't tell me no. And so just like little things like that. And I just remember I would be sitting there writing or something, and he would just sit on my bed and would just watch me for like half an hour, so not say a word or anything. And I felt so intimidated. I was so uncomfortable, and it was very anxiety inducing for me as well. And I couldn't explain it to because she didn't understand it. She would tell me that I was too sensitive. Again, I think it was invalidating me in a lot of ways. And I started to kind of start feeling like, okay, like, maybe she's right. this is his home and things like that. And so one thing that helped me get through this, I think, was that I started writing poetry, and I just would write day and night. I would go to school, I would write in school, I would come home and I would write at home. And that was just like a constant cycle. And not only was it helping me to better understand English, but also just help me cope with things. And I remember being I think I was around 15 years old. My teacher, I became quite close with her, and I shared my poem with her, and she told me, she said, I think that this is something that we can publish. About a month later, I received a letter in the mail. I was at home and I was outside playing with my siblings, and I received a letter saying, "Congratulations, your poem is being published." And I just was so excited, and I couldn't wait to share the story with my mom. I ran to her and I was like, Mom, my poem's being published. And she was so excited for me. But then the first thing she said, well, you have to share it with your dad. And I just remember feeling like I don't want to share this with him at all. Like, he made me feel like he just undercut me in a lot of ways. Like, I just felt like I was unworthy, and I just felt like he would have a comment for everything. And so sure enough, when I went to him, he read the poem, and he was like silence. It was like the longest 2 minutes of my life, just standing there in front of him. And again, he was like laying on the couch, and he said, "But how did you publish this? Like, you don't know half of these words." And I just was absolutely devastated. I was so upset. I remember going to my room, and I just was wanting to cry. I was so angry with him. I was so angry by his words. And I felt like, okay, like maybe this is not something that I'm good at. And after going to my room, I remember not writing another poem. When the book came, I didn't even read the poem in the book. I threw that away, and suddenly I didn't have anything to cope with. And that was also very scary for me, because I think the insecurities were being driven by his words and his comments and his nitpicking. And then also there was a lot of things that I was internalizing and still processing. And even at 15, 16 years old, I didn't really know how to deal with this.
So during this time, did anyone from your family take you to see a therapist? You've had a lot of stuff going on. You have your stuff with your grandmother passing away, just dealing with acclimating yourself to a new country, the situation you came from. There's a lot kind of going on here. So did they ever take that initiative?
Initially, when I first got adopted, there was a therapist, a social worker that came into the home. She was there for about 2 weeks, and we said we didn't need her. But in all of this, when this was happening, no, I didn't go to see a therapist. I did express to my mom at one point that I was suicidal, and her reaction to it kind of made me, it kind of reassured me that I need to back away from this. And I think going back to your idea of like consciously or unconsciously recognizing your actions, I think when I discussed this with her, I think I started to kind of realize, okay, I need to take a step back from sharing things with her as well. Because when I told her that I was thinking about taking my own life, I mean, I was at my low, and she said, you need to talk to your dad. I think that was the moment where I said, okay, I need to, take a step back and just deal with this on my own. Because I don't know if she realized the magnitude of how uncomfortable I was around him. And, I would come home from school, and I wouldn't even not be in the same room with him because of his racism, because of misogyny, and just his comments and things like this, that I just was so uncomfortable that I always tried to be away from him. And so for that year, I still continued to have these thoughts, and they became more and more like urgent, I think. And I remember we went to my mom's uncle's house, and her grandpa was there. So I was trying to talk to him, and came into the room. He came up and he said to me, it's not like, why are you even trying to speak with him? It's not like he kind of understand you. And I was, again, so devastated because I had already been so insecure about the way I spoke English. And I just felt like I wasn't learning fast enough, and I was frustrated. And also being around my family, I felt so alone in that room. And it's not because I didn't feel like my family loved me. It's because I didn't feel like they could understand if I had expressed this to them. And so I never did.
Well, he's just a bully. I mean, he is a pure bully. He's extreme nitpicking you. He's kicking you when you're down. He's going after your vulnerabilities that he knows that those are your vulnerabilities and your insecurities. He's exerting control. He's physically intimidating you in the sense of when he's around you, when he's in your room, and hovering in that way. His presence alone, the way he's carrying himself toward you, is meant to invoke fear in you. It's an intimidation, and he's really doing a perfect job of it. And you are just alone. You're feeling alone inside this house where no one else is experiencing the same thing you are. And you're just really on an island by yourself here.
Yeah, and one thing I should also mention is that I felt really alone in a lot of ways because I couldn't relate to the way that he was treating my siblings. The way that he communicated with them, the way that he raised them was different from the way that he raised me. And I think a lot of the things that I was seeking externally was a lot of validation from him. So I was also undermining a lot of the abuse that was coming my way because I was really always constantly trying to get validations from him in a lot of ways because I was just trying to be like my sisters. I didn't understand why he was targeting me in a lot of these things. And so when all this happening, there was that frustration. And then I was still coping with the loss of my grandmother and trying to just deal with the shame and guilt that I didn't really was speaking about, that I was feeling, because I also didn't feel like anyone would understand from the outside. Like I said before, it looked like we were a picture perfect family. It looked like I had everything in the world. And, that in reality of that, I had nothing. I had everything, again, when I was a child and when I was living with my grandmother. And so dealing with that and then dealing with his abuse and just internalizing a lot of things, I ended up trying to take my own life. And I overdosed on prescription medication. And that night, I woke up that morning knowing that what I thought was going to be my last day. And I had this sense of calmness and numbness that came over me. I felt like that was, in a way, I was like almost seeking closure. I ended up overdosing, and throughout the night, thankfully I survived. I ended up vomiting throughout the night, the entire night, and I woke up and the night was kind of a blur. And then I looked in the mirror and I had basically my blood cells exploded in my face, and it was so noticeable. My mom ended up taking me to the hospital, and the doctor came in and she made my mom step out, and she asked me if I was bulimic, and I said, no, I'm not. And then she asked me if anything was happening at home. And I told her, I said, nope, everything's fine. And I left. And I felt so embarrassed and so ashamed to be there. And that even happened. And I've never spoken about this story publicly, or I've never told, about this either. And I just remember from that day forward, I just tried to, in a lot of ways, to try to get better and process things in a lot of ways. And I was so glad that I was alive. I think also when all of it was happening, it happened so fast and it was so chaotic. And that when I was in that hospital room and the doctor was asking me, I really kind of started thinking and started panicking of what could have happened if I would have passed away. And so it was a really a difficult time for me. And
so eventually your family moves from California and they go to Oregon. And while you are in Oregon very, very early on, you end up going to see a psychic. And I know a lot of people will probably think like, oh, psychics, what are you thinking? Or whatever, they might think you're crazy. but sometimes they can say something that just feels right, and you run with it, and you believe it, and sometimes you truly believe it, and sometimes I think when it comes to those things, sometimes you just hear the thing you need to hear, and if it's positive, you take it and you go with it, and this psychic really did change your life.
And she had tarot cards out, and she said, someone is trying to come through. And she said, your grandmother is trying to come through. And she said, she's standing behind you in the corner. And my hair stood up, and I got so emotional. I remember I started crying, and this woman hugged me, and she hugged me the same exact way that my grandmother used to hug me when I was a little child. When I was a baby boy, I was scared of storms. And when there would be storms, my grandmother would hug me and would fall asleep with me. And she hugged me the same exact way. And I was just so emotional. And the things that she was telling me, I hadn't shared with anyone. And it was only something that my birth mom and my grandmother would have known. It was such a special moment for me. And I felt really the presence of my grandmother in that room. And the one thing that I'm really guilty about is that I felt like I had betrayed my grandmother. And this woman had said to me, she said, your grandmother is with you every single day, and she knows everything you're going through, and she loves you, and she is always there with you, and she is so proud of you. And those words were so moving for me, and I felt like I could finally have this sense of closure from my grandmother that I was desperately seeking. And so finally being able to have this closure, it felt so relieving, and just this calmness came over me, and I was able to just put that aside, and from that point forward, I moved with my grandmother as she was with me through these journeys, and I think it made me a lot stronger in a lot of ways, and I think I needed her, and in the coming years. I don't know if that moment didn't happen. I don't know if I truthfully would even be sitting here and being able to share this story.
So we've had this earlier podcast with someone named Lexi, the survivor named Lexi, and Lexi was adopted, and what got her through was her belief in Jesus. That was her strength. She always believed, no matter what, that Jesus believed in her, and it really carried her through. That was the love that she felt. She wasn't getting this love from anyone else in her household, but this love that she was getting from Jesus was this unconditional love that she needed, and it gave her confidence in herself, and she was not looking for that love because Jesus gave it to her. So for you, your grandmother was that love. And it was true love. It was true love. It was unconditional love. And, hearing that, even though she's not here on earth anymore, you had that love put back in you here at that moment. And this was really the strength that you needed to move forward.
Absolutely. I've never really... Truthfully, I'd never experienced the kind of love that I had with her, and I don't think I'll be lucky if I ever get to experience it again. And so like I said before, everything I do and everything I am is because of her. It's because of the values that she installed in me when I was a child, and the wisdom that she had shared with me. Really, she was such an incredible woman, and she, in that moment, gave me the courage to continue and deal with it, even though there was still a lot of unclarity and there was still a lot of me asking for validation from him, and just still dealing with this abuse. But she gave me that courage and that ability to move forward with it. Yeah.
So after you have this moment, this really big pivotal moment with the psychic, you end up going to college, you end up going away to school, and with a lot of people, when they do go to school, their mind opens up, they meet new people, they see how other people interact with each other. and you have a little bit more freedom while you're there to understand maybe what you went through wasn't the best, and you can really start to figure out who you are. So tell us about your college experience and how it helped you through this whole entire process.
Yeah. Went to college. My freshman year, I joined every organization you could think of on campus. I was involved with everything. I joined a fraternity. I was excelling in school. I think this was protective self coming in to the play, but I was really, I think, searching for a new identity. I felt like for me, it was like a fresh start. I could just go there and make it my experience. And that was something that I was really looking forward to. And my relationship became more distant in a sense, but he became a bit more, I would say, controlling. Suddenly he was texting me and calling me and was asking me, like what I was doing and things like this. And when I would come home for breaks, I hated that because, I felt so uncomfortable being there at home with him. And, he just made me feel very uncomfortable because I didn't really put up with things he was saying. Our values didn't align. He was often very racist. He would be watching TV, for example, and he would call, an African-American and the N-word or things like that. And I would just always I would always correct him, and I would always say, like, that's completely inappropriate to say. And he at times got physical with me because of this frustration. I think for him, it was like this control, and I was retaliating against him, and he didn't really know how to deal with it. And so he at times got physical with me, and he would choke me, and he, would call me every name you could imagine. And then, like I said again, 10 minutes later, he would demand an apology from me because I was disrespectful. And my mom, yet again, she was seeing this, and I just started realizing really consciously that she wasn't, she would tell him, this is not okay, but then she would come to me and would say, oh, well, he's like, he's just being like, you need to calm down, you need to relax and things like that. And it kind of became almost like a joke. There was no excuse for it. I started recognizing these patterns. I saw the control. I saw the nitpicking, him being overbearing, like the racism, just things like that, the emotional abuse, the physical. And my junior year, I had an opportunity to travel, to study abroad. College gave me an opportunity to kind of start creating my identity, I think, in a lot of ways. And I grew a lot from that. And then I think at the end of my junior year, I had this idea that, you know what, I'm going to walk away. I think by the end of my junior year, I recognized that this relationship wasn't working and that I needed to look out for myself because, again, my depression was still there. The anxiety was still there. I had panic attacks often, especially prior to me going home for breaks. Like that was very anxiety inducing for me because I knew that this behavior was going to happen at home, and I couldn't do anything about it. And so my senior year, I had gone home. At this point, I'm starting to explore myself. I'm starting to understand my identity, who I am. And I started coming out to a few of my friends as gay. And it was something that took a lot of courage from me, again, because just of how insecure it was. I don't think I came off like that because, again, everyone who saw me saw this funny, outgoing guy. And then I would come home, and at night I would be numb, unable to sleep at night. And because like I just had no hope for future or whatever, you know what I mean? It was just a really difficult thing for me to deal with. But I said, okay, you know what? I have to be able to grow from this. And so I started coming out to a few of my friends, and surely like everyone was so loving and so accepting of me. And my best friend in college, he said, my roommate too, he said, man, it doesn't matter. Like, I love you no matter what. And just these things were so reassuring. And I finally said, okay, you know what? I needed to come out to my mom and dad. I need to be able to tell them this because they need to know who I am. And I said, Mom, Dad, I'm gay. And in that moment, I really didn't care what my mom had to say. Of course, I wanted her approval, but for me, it was more important of what he had to say. Because again, I think, still looking for this validation from him and this need to be or want to be accepted by him. And he looked at me, he said, "That's okay, I'll still love you, but I'm going to still call you a faggot." Like, who says that? I just felt like something in my gut told me that this was not okay. And so I started becoming upset about it. And I started telling my friends about his reaction and things like that. And they were telling me not normal. And again, they started recognizing these patterns too. And so it further kind of reassured me that, yeah, I think I need to take a step back from this relationship. I knew that these patterns of abuse and emotional and at times physical was real, and it was validating, and that I needed to do something about it. And my senior year, I was nominated for homecoming court. But prior to this, like about a week prior to this, I went home and just for like a weekend, and I was watching TV, and I was watching, funny enough, Bachelor, and came into the room, and my sisters were in the room, and my mom was in the room. She was like half asleep on the couch. And he came in and he said something along the lines of, "All these sluts want to be famous." And I just got so angry with him because my sisters were there. And I looked at him and I said, "How can you say this about a woman? But then you have your daughter sitting here and listening to you, and you should be making them proud. You should be there, someone that they look up to. Like, I don't understand how you can say this." And I also said to him, "You don't know half of the stories of these women on the show." And you know what? And he got so angry with me, and he started hitting me and started cussing at me. And my sisters at this point left the room, so they didn't see this. But my mom like kind of woke up from it, and she immediately intervened. And I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm done." And I got in my car and I drove away and called her, and I said, if he doesn't get help and if he doesn't get therapy, like, he will not have a relationship with me. He will not be part of my family's life. He won't see me get married. He won't be part of my children's life. I said, this is it. And so when this nomination happened for the homecoming court, I asked my mom if she wanted to come, and she said, of course. And she said, "Are you going to ask your dad?" And I said, "If you want me to, I will, but I don't want him to come." And she said something along the lines of, "I don't want to come then." I said, "Okay, don't come." And she got very defensive, and she said, no, I'm coming, whether you like it or not. We're going to both be there. And so I ended up inviting him as well. And that whole day, it was such a fun day with my friends. It just was ruined again. It was something that I wanted to have such a nice day. We were, we had a few drinks in the morning, and we were just looking forward to it. And they were there, and that was the last time I saw him. And about a month and a half passed by, and I told my mom. He kept calling me, he kept texting me, and I wouldn't respond to his messages. And my mom started with the threats, and then he left me really terrible voice messages saying things like, "I'm being so fucking disrespectful," and just things like this. And I told my mom, I said, "Mom, I'm not having a relationship with him." I said, "I'm walking away." I asked for one thing. I asked for him to get therapy, and he chose not to. And I'm walking away. And this is when they said, "We're going to take your car. We're going to take your phone, your health insurance, and we're going to stop co-signing for your loans." And I said, "Okay, take it." And that was a moment also that I think was a key moment for me, because in that moment, I realized that they had no idea what I was capable of. They had no idea what kind of life that I had lived, and the kind of hell that he had put me through, and that my mom was part of. And I think that was a moment for me where I said, okay, you know what? I will figure this out on my own, whatever it is. My grandmother is here with me, and that's all that I care about. And I left everything. And 2 days later, they came, they took everything. And that was the last time that I had ever spoken to him. It's been 2 years now.
So this whole time you think that your mom is this ally of yours, but when everything really falls apart here, you come to the realization that no, your mom isn't the ally that you thought she was. So how hard is it for you to deal with this being a fact?
I had expected that was going to be the outcome of it, and I had prepared myself. And I think it's easy to say for me that I think probably even going into college, I really didn't have a relationship with him anymore. It was there, but it was just kind of for the motion of things. And so I disassociated myself from feeling anything with him. And I don't know if I stopped loving him in that moment. I don't know what that was, but I was prepared for that. But with my mom, I was so devastated. I felt heartbroken again. And it's constantly, I still at times feel that I was made a second choice. And I've felt like that throughout my life for a very long time, that I wasn't worthy of love. It comes up at times, and it's something that I'm working on consciously, but I was devastated, really. I tried to be so strong and I tried to stay so together, but alone, I had nights where I was crying endlessly because I missed her so much. But then again, I knew that I needed to walk away from the relationship because it was for my benefit. And I'll never forget the one message that I got from her. And I explained to her, I said, "Mom, I don't expect you to choose my side. I don't expect you to choose his side, because that's not what it's about. I want you to love him and be a loving wife to him, because that's your relationship with him. But I want you to be a loving and supportive mom to me, because I'm your son."
And the sad thing about this is that your mom ultimately wrote you back and really chose your dad over you. And it's a very difficult thing to come to terms with. So I guess, how are you doing right now? How are you coping? Where are you in your life right now? What are you doing to work on your recovery? Because this isn't really a small recovery at all. You've been dealing with a lot your whole entire life. Emotionally, you've dealt with physical abuse, but you've been living in this chaos for such a long time. You've lived so many lives within this short amount of time in your life compared to most people. So I guess, how are you able to move forward? What are you doing to move forward? And are you still in school? Tell us what's going on in your life right now, really on a day-to-day basis as well, too.
Of course. Yeah. I moved about a year ago, and I started my master's in media communication. And so I was kind of started a new adventure, if you will, here in Germany. And I've been living here for about a year and a half. And I think I made a promise to myself. I said that in order to move forward and be not just happy, but really have this feeling of being content and looking forward to life, you need to work on yourself. One realization is that I had was that no one's going to save you. It's something that there are going to be resources out there for you, and there are going to be people that are going to want to talk to you about these things. But you need to really work on your internal self in order to be able to really fully move forward with this. One thing for me that has made a big difference was surrounding myself with a positive community. I have really loving friends around me. And I also, just through reading and through, as I said, just communicating with people and sharing my story, and also just debriefing and discussing these things, I think that has made a big difference in my life. And I am, for the very first time in my life, I am looking more so living in the moment than looking for the future or living in the bag. And I think that has some volume about where I am at in my journey to healthiness and emotional and physical. And I've been very open to new experiences, to new adventures. I've started dating, going on dates and seeing people, and I started working on my insecurities by acknowledging them. I think then in facing them, whether, when I have these thoughts, I start reflecting on them and why am I having these thoughts? And then I go through that. And I have my days when I'm sad, or I have my moments where I'm kind of just want to be curled up in bed, but I am the happiest that I've ever been in my life. I can genuinely say that. And really, I've been really, really working on myself and just being conscious of that. And I think a lot of that has to do with me forgiving, just me wishing him really genuinely finding the kind of closure that he needs and happiness, however that looks like for him. I've also been, more importantly, really kind to myself. And I think that's most important. I think that I started to understand that this wasn't my fault, that this is something that I've gone through and it has made me who I am today. And it will always be part of my journey, but it's something that I need to kind of step into the daylight from and just start focusing on myself more. Yeah.
So, Rhonda, I really want to thank you for being a guest on our show today. You've been through a lot and you're still standing. You're still here. You are really a very, very strong person for going through everything that you went through, all your mental health struggles, and to be here to tell your story to help people means a lot to me and to everyone in this community. To be so forgiving to the people that abused you, not too many people get to that point, and you already have at such a young age, and you're still on your path of growing and learning about yourself and your identity and everything like that. So just like a really, really, really big thank you for being our guest on our show today.
Yeah, and I also want to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and also more than that, for providing a platform for people to be able to listen. Because I think a lot of people out there feel like they're alone. And so being able to share these experiences or share these stories, hopefully they can relate to these things and know that they can do this and that they can look forward to a better future and happier and healthier life. So I want to thank you for that as well.
So this isn't the end of the episode. The story kept on going, in the sense of when this episode was released, it was taken down within a 12-hour period. And what happened was Rhonda wanted a member of the family who was not actually mentioned on today's show to listen to it. It was just one person of the extended family that Rhonda felt that they could trust. And, all Rhonda wanted was empathy and understanding from someone within that family. And he thought he got it. However, what happened was that person betrayed his trust and played it for other members of the family. And that caused quite a storm. And we put a lot of fires out, but this really set Rhonda back. And there was this other person that thought could be a little bit of a lifeline for him, and it ended up not being that at all. And it really made him take a step back to take a look at things even further. And we've been in contact with him since that day, and I think it was like a year and a half after, maybe 2 years after, and he's doing well. He's back on his path. He's doing a lot better, and he's living his life, and he's doing it his way. and he's doing it without being surrounded by abuse. So if you are listening still, Rhonda, thank you once again for being a guest on our show. And if you want to be a guest like Ronda was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Top of the page, there's a button that says guest form. When you click on that button, it takes you to our guest form page. There you can read all of these instructions, and please send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com, or fill out our guest form and press the submit button and send it in the format that we ask for. And as we mentioned earlier on, we have a new initiative. If you have an online store of any sort, an Etsy store, an eBay store, if you're a freelancer of any sort and you are an abuse survivor, or if you're trying to squirrel money away while you're in it, or maybe you're just trying to put food on the table and pay rent in the aftermath, please send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com. We are going to be creating a portal on our website, and we're going to eventually start to get people to start shopping through the portal. They'll click on your stores. They'll go to your eBay stores. They'll go to your Etsy stores. They'll go to your Fiverr stores, or whatever service. They'll go to your websites, whatever service that you're going to be offering people. We want people to use your services to help you get out of the situations you're in, to squirrel money away, to create a better life for you and your families. So please send us your stores. We want to really, really help you create a better life. So please do that. And I think I said do way too many times there. And if you need support, we do have our support group, and that's also at narcissistapocalypse.com. And at the top of the page, you press the support group button. When you click on that button, it takes you to our support group. It's our very own safe social network. And on that network, we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoon, and Saturday nights. We also have our own forum boards for you to post and for your fellow survivors to validate your experience and give you supportive words. We have ad-free episodes on there, and we have bonus episodes. We just did a great bonus episode about the movie Jennifer's Body. We dissected that movie from an abuse standpoint, calling out all these different things. It was a really fun time discussing this movie and pointing out all these things for everyone to see and to hear, just so you can validate your experience through movies sometimes, or TV. So we're going to be starting to do more of that. So we have that on our bonus episodes as well. And if you need even more support, everyone, please do go visit our friends at domesticshelters.org. And there you can find articles and resources that can help you make sense of what you're going through. They have every website address, every phone number, every email address for shelters that are, or domestic violence agencies as well, in towns that are big, towns that are small, everywhere. So please do go visit our friends at domesticshelters.org. And that is it for today. So for myself and Rhonda, we hope you have a good night.